Let's ask you some questions from our viewers, directly from our viewers. We have Jennifer getting in touch saying, one question for Tom. The VAT cut on energy bills for a year, which is something Rishi Sunak has now proposed. She says, really? The Tories have already raised them. The energy price rise is their fault. Is Jennifer right there?
I suppose it depends what you mean by that. Yes, there are levies on bills, for example, the green levies, for example, VAT, but those aren't new. They haven't come in recently. Those have been in part of bills for a very long time. So there hasn't been any government intervention to raise bills directly in recent years. What people might complain about is the lack of domestic supply, for example, the lack of homegrown energy sources that might well be putting bills up because we're reliant on these international markets. But it's true to say that the price rise that we're seeing for energy bills is mainly coming because of global price rises rather than specific policy. The criticism of government policy when it comes to energy bills isn't that the government has made them more expensive, it's that the government could make them less expensive by taking off the tax already applied.
Well, hasn't Rishi changed his mind, though? Because he was speaking with Kwasi Kwarteng and saying that, no, it's the wrong tax to cut, it's the wrong tax to cut, and suddenly he's cutting tax.
Yes, certainly. Just a couple of months ago, Rishi Sunak actually stood up at the dispatch box of the House of Commons to say that it would be wrong to cut VAT on fuel bills. Instead, he wanted to do this subsidy that was more targeted at low earners, whereas, of course, a VAT cut would affect everyone, would give everyone help, and he was saying that that was the wrong way to spend £5 billion. Well, now he seems to have changed his mind. I suppose if you were being a bit cynical, you might ask, what is it about being more than 20 points behind the tax-cutting Liz Truss that has urged you to change your mind on this issue? But certainly he's made a calculation here that he does need to be seen to do more to help people with their bills, and tax cutting is the way to win over a Conservative audience.
It's almost like getting votes is more important to them than principles. So maybe.
He's changed his mind, though, and that's over this since this thing began.
Yeah, it's a bit
not a good look at all.
Well, if I remember correctly, Tom, you're quite pro-fracking. Am I right?
Yes, I think that.
Because Sean says, are you glad the two candidates supported fracking, Tom?
Me personally, well, from a personal perspective, I do think it's a little odd that we have these restrictions on shale gas exploration that actually mean that the kind of digging that you can do in England with regard to fracking is actually less than the kind of activity you can do on a normal building site. The way that they measure how the ground might move as you dig in, actually, you have a tighter seismic range when it comes to shale gas exploration than you do for any other kind of construction. So even if we were to just equalise that in terms of the different kinds of construction that goes on, that would be a more rational policy. But yes, I do think that it was probably a positive sign that we saw both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss last night say that if local communities support it, they wouldn't ban fracking in the UK. Of course, that's undergoing a review right now. Right. We're sitting on a lot of shale gas, and it is something that, not immediately, but in the medium term, could bring down energy prices too.
Right, now there's been a lot of questions, so lots of people ask this question. Is there any chance Boris Johnson can stay on as Prime Minister? A lot of us want him to.
Well, under the current rules of the Conservative Party, which of course are set by the 1922 Committee Executive, he cannot stay on. The fact that there is currently a leadership process going on that's already underway means that the Prime Minister has resigned as Conservative Party leader. That process has begun. And under the rules of the Conservative Party, if you've resigned, you cannot then stand to replace yourself. So he's excluded under the current rules from replacing himself. There's some speculation that he might want to come back in the future. There are many historical examples of people who were Prime Minister, then it was someone else for a bit, and then someone else came back. I mean, we only have to look at Disraeli or Gladstone or Pitt or Wilson or Churchill. I mean, there are lots of historical examples of people coming back. But I would, unless there is a dramatic change of rules in the middle of a leadership contest, there's no way Boris Johnson will stay on.
It would also just be very, very bizarre and a bit tone-deaf, I think, if that were to happen. Which leads me actually on to the next question I have here, which is, will there be an early general election when the new PM comes into office?
Well, that's entirely within the gift of the new Prime Minister. There's no constitutional norm that there must be. There's no automatic process that there should be. But since the repeal of the Fixed Terms Parliament Act, it is within the gift of the Prime Minister to request an election of the Queen. So if the new Prime Minister decided that they wanted to have an election at any time between now and about January 2025, they could. However, I think it's very unlikely, given that this new Prime Minister will have just got in. We've got some rocky times ahead economically. The new Prime Minister, whoever he or she is, will probably want some time to deliver policy before an election is called.
And actually, this is one from me. Obviously, we had that Fixed Term Parliament Act, which did what it said on the tin. It fixed the term of Parliament. Now that that's been repealed and it is in the gift of Prime Ministers to call general elections, how long do you think the Conservatives can get away with leaving it before they call a general election? Because they might be looking at the polls in 2 years' time and saying, actually, this is a really bad idea.
So I have it on relatively good authority that the candidates have actually asked this of the constitutional experts to see how long they could physically go. And there are statutory limits. Because the Fixed Term Parliament Act has gone, that means that you can't call a snap election without a two-thirds majority in Parliament. That requirement has now gone, so a snap election can be called at any time. But a Parliament still has a definite time limit, and that's 5 years from the time of the last election.
Okay.
So this Parliament can run up to the 12th of December 2024, but if a Prime Minister really wanted to stretch it, they could wait until the 12th of December 2024 to call that election and then have perhaps a 2-month election campaign, and that would take us through to 2025 for the election. Although the received wisdom right now is that a May election is more usual in our constitutional settlement, so perhaps May 2024 is the likely aim. If they really wanted to stretch it, they could take it for about 6 months further.
I think they'll take it for as far as they can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tom, thank you. He is a political genius, as you can tell. So we hope he's answered your questions to your satisfaction. And he will be joining us a bit later to talk more about everything that's going on in politics.